Hello to the pessimistic, optimistic, and everyone in between. My name is Connor Philippi, and welcome back to the Minnesotan Sports Podcast. Took a little bit of a break after the crash out of the Vikings season. We're going to be back and talking about them in just a little bit here going into the summer. But it's been kind of a crazy, busy last few months. We moved, we did a whole bunch of stuff, and I was kind of just catching my breath from it. So I'm back into the uploads now here soon. I kind of moved my studio around so I have more space and have more motivation to do it. So should all be good right now. But as you can see, we've got a baseball field behind us, and it is Twins season. I'm joined by my good friend Jake Adams. So funny enough, the last time the two of us were on this podcast, he had just told me he was going to work for a baseball team in Wisconsin. And then sure enough, a few months later, he calls me and my wife and asks for us to come down and be a part of the front office. So now we're all here. We're all in central Wisconsin and getting ready for Northwoods League season. So it should be a lot of fun and fun to talk about some baseball because opening day is tomorrow, and it's going to be a lot of fun regardless of how the season goes for the Twins.
Oh, yeah.
But first of all, let's kind of just do a general everyone hates the Pohlads talk here. So for those of you who aren't caught up, basically it goes back to the 80s when the Twins won 2 World Series and then riding that wave and just kind of putting all their eggs in that basket. The entire Pohlad family for the last 40 years have now been using that World Series, double up as a means to not have to spend too much money every single year. It's kind of get 2 or 3 big names that will sell tickets and then don't worry about the rest. And it kind of led to the Pohlads deciding, well, there's a lot of factors in it. They kind of messed up their business and stuff as well, but they're now finally selling the team, thank God. Right now the estimation's about $1.7 billion they're asking for, but also recently came out that they're about $425 million in debt. So Jake, do you have any, I feel like you're kind of the one that's in the know of how the Pohlad talks are going, the likelihood that a deal getting done this season, seemingly more and more less likely as time goes on.
Yeah, I have to say it's been a little quiet on the Pohlad front besides what we just learned about them asking for $1.7 billion, the $425 million in debt. That's been the biggest news since the Ishbia brothers dropped out in the ownership race to bolster their ownership of the White Sox. And honestly, it concerns me a little bit that there aren't many high-profile groups that are out there making their intentions for buying the Twins known, because that was kind of what we got when Justin Ishbia declared his intention to buy the Twins, and we got really excited. There was a high-profile guy who came into the Phoenix Suns organization, immediately made an impact by getting Kevin Durant, and just kind of listen to what the fans actually wanted versus now we're in a situation where we don't know who will be the owner of the Twins by the end of the year, the start of next year. There's so much uncertainty that as a Twins fan, it kind of hurts because you saw in that 2023 season, we finally took that step to get past the playoff series to kind of break that streak. You had a breakout star in Royce Lewis who solidified his playoff kind of legacy with those 2 home runs against Gausman, the homers against Houston, and Correa obviously being a boss in the playoffs. Pablo stepped up. But now we're 2 years removed from it, and you really don't know what's going to happen. And they seem to like the praise that they get for the additional close to $10 million that they gave in the budget to get Harrison Bader, Danny Coulombe, and Ty France, which hopefully they turn out for us, but you just kind of are disheartened by the fact that we don't know who will be owning the team. We don't know if we're stuck with the Pohlads, if there's a way out, but hopefully we get answers soon. That's all we really want.
Absolutely. And I mean, obviously the looming most likely work stoppage that will probably happen in 27 season, always looming. Thankfully that's 2 full seasons removed, but certainly a factor, as well as all the debt that the Pohlads have managed to accrue for this team. But at least there's a step in the right direction with that, because honestly 3 years ago I didn't think that this ownership group would ever sell this team or even consider selling it. So that's at least a good thing, but we'll have to keep an eye on that and see how it all goes. So now that all that Pohlad hate is out of the way, we'll go ahead and kind of talk about the off season, which based on everything we just talked about was a very quiet one. So I'll throw a graphic up on the screen here and we'll talk about a few of these. So first we'll talk about the subtractions. First couple, Kyle Farmer, he was a great presence in the clubhouse, but that was at the point where his career was kind of starting to take a dive. He couldn't hit the broadside of a barn for the majority of last season, couldn't keep him on the roster. And then losing Caleb Thielbar, he had a couple good years. Last year was just atrocious.
Yeah.
The only reason he was in the bullpen at all is because we were so thin at a left-handing pitching position. Moran, he was kind of getting to that point. I feel like he still had some left in him, but it was kind of a prove-it year last year, and he didn't really prove that. Yeah. And then Carlos Santana, he was a nice surprise last year with how much we paid him. That was one where he's getting up there in age. We could have brought him back, but with the ownership, with making those moves, we weren't going to invest money on a guy at that age.
Yeah.
And then I'll let you talk about whichever of these guys you want, but I also want to say we've said a lot about Max Kepler.
Yeah.
That's one where I'm very happy about getting rid of him, and I got to say it one more time because I think I made a TikTok about this recently, just kind of like asking other MLB fans, like, hey, what's a guy on your team or was on your team? It feels like the media gives other fans the wrong impression of him, and I use Kepler as an example because I feel like the media always shows his highlights. They show his crazy 2-week runs, the fact that he, for some reason, I don't know if he eats a different breakfast every time he plays the Guardians, but he's amazing against the Guardians every single time. Twins fans like us have seen the other side of that, and the amount that we paid him was pretty ridiculous considering he was incredibly inconsistent. He would have those 0-20 runs, and then he'd have a really good couple of weeks. Everyone would think he was back. He had a really good defensive approach, and he was obviously above average defender. But the part that got me was just, I have his stats here somewhere, but just how crazy bad he was in the postseason. Not swinging on that strike 3 against the Astros to end that series, just in general, he hit, I believe, under 150 in the postseason in his career so far. He just had to go.
Yeah, and I think from the subtractions over the course of this offseason and leading into the season, sending my best to guys like Thielbar, Farmer, and Moran who are in new systems where maybe they'll get a better shot. Like Kyle Farmer, great clubhouse guy, great veteran, but it stopped the production of guys like Brooks Lee, who are going to be more of a utility role where he fits in anywhere else. Giovanni Moran, I think he's got something, but it always felt like he never showed it at Target Field. I hope Fenway can bring it out of him. I think he's still an insane talent. Thielbar is such a good comeback story from being in the MLB to falling out of baseball to being in the American Association and climbing his way back to the big leagues. It's one of those stories you love to hear. He's a local Midwest guy, and it was the dream to pitch on the Twins, so sending the best to him. The two that you talked about, Kepler, first off, I'm happy to see him gone, but not because oh man, I hate Max Kepler. I'm not a fan of his. I appreciated what he did for Minnesota, but I always felt like that 2-week stretch was kind of the main look at Kepler, where people were like, oh my God, he's the greatest right fielder we've ever had. He had some good runs with us and he provided great moments, but it always just felt like he was a moment guy. He wasn't a consistent guy, and maybe I'll get some hurtful comments about that because guys like Royce are a moment guy right now, but with his injuries. But Carlos Santana, that's the main one that I hated watching him go, but I almost loved watching him go to Cleveland because they gave up on Josh Naylor, who I thought he was going to have an insane bounce back year this year. I thought he was on the precipice of something, and they traded him in for a 40-year-old, almost 40-year-old first baseman who Carlos was a great glove last year, got the first base gold glove. He was a great leader, but does he have enough left in the tank to be a leader for a playoff team versus Naylor, who, yet again, I feel like he is a moments guy, but he stepped up when he needed to. I mean, that massive home run against the Yankees where he's rocking the baby around the bases, that kind of is a rallying cry for Cleveland saying, like, we can stand toe-to-toe with the best of them. But I liked Carlos. I liked how he fit in, but I think the main thing we have to look at is who is up next for those positions where Kyle Farmer leaves. Now it opens up an opportunity for a Brooks Lee to get more playing time and Austin Martin when he's up to get more playing time. The bullpen is going to be a little interesting. I mean, I'm a big Randy Dobnak guy, but making the MLB roster right out of camp when he got sent down, it was a surprising move. His slider's been nasty, so it's fun to see him coming back up, but you see those holes that Moran and Thielbar are leaving. Are we going to step up and fill them, or is it just going to kind of be a constant revolving door of we'll try these guys and see where they fit? But I think Santana's the one that left the biggest question mark because we didn't have a bona fide first baseman. We had Larnach, who's played first in minor leagues, Miranda, who's getting more used to that, and Eddie Julian, who never really took the reps there, never really, before this spring, was considered a first base guy. But I'm interested to see because Eddie had a pretty solid spring. It seems like he's kind of finding his groove again. And if he can work his way into an everyday first base role, good on him.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, since we kind of did a natural segue into that, we'll just kind of go over this opening day roster here. So first of all, the position we didn't expect to change, we knew wouldn't change, the catcher position. We have Ryan Jeffers, who has been a pretty solid piece for us. You know, he kind of hit that consistency a little bit as the last couple seasons have progressed, and Vasquez was pretty rough last year, but having that veteran depth, I think, is something that we kind of had to keep. You know, if we had gotten the right price for him, I think we would have shipped him off, but like everything we were talking about with the Padres, I don't think people realized how rough it was last year for him. I don't think there's much of a chance we would have gotten that deal done. But for that catcher position, pretty much solid. And this is where it gets interesting. Obviously, Royce Lewis and his injuries, Brooks Lee getting hurt, he was kind of already kind of fighting for a spot anyway. And then, gosh, who was the last? That was in the bullpen with, why am I blanking on? Stewart got hurt as well.
Yeah.
So those are the three major injuries that Twins fans can already look forward to for opening day. But we have infielders here: Ty France, Willie Castro, Mickey Gasper, Julian, Correa, and Miranda. And we were talking about this a little bit. If you had to give one guy you were either surprised is on here that you think shouldn't be, or the other way around, which one would you think?
I think we have to talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to that infield group, and the fact that a lot of Twins fans are asking who the hell is Mickey Gasper. Watching spring training this year was really interesting to see him at the plate and where he was playing over the field. I compare it to like a 2018 guy, and not a lot of Twins fans will remember him, but Ryan Lamar, who made the team out of spring training, and everyone's like, who the hell is this guy? Mickey Gasper, he's a big utility, super utility guy. He can catch, he can play second, short, third. He played a couple of outfield positions in the minor leagues, but I see him as kind of fitting with that Castro, that Brooks Lee kind of mold where you can put him in a position and just, he can stop the bleeding for a couple of days. But he looked pretty solid at the plate and in the field for the Twins. And I think he's going to be a surprise on how long he's up at the big leagues. A lot of people saw the Giovanni Moran for Mickey Gasper trade and were like, I mean, it's kind of a even trade because neither of them really are getting the time to shine. But I really hope that this is kind of a new setting. Hey, this is where I belong, and you can kind of find your groove. I expect Mickey to get a lot of DH reps and maybe some second base reps when you want to let a guy like Julian or Brooks take a break. But I'm kind of excited to see how he does.
Yeah.
And one other guy, just to kind of talk on quickly, is Ty France, because all the beat writers are saying he's the spring training MVP. He's had an insane OPS. He's looked great at the plate, great in the field. He also can fill that first base role for an everyday kind of thing. And I'm excited to see, because we have $1 million put in him. That's not a great contract for the MLB, but it's a very Twins low risk, high reward kind of thing. And I hope it pays off, because I'd love to see another mashing first baseman in Ty France.
Yeah, absolutely. In the outfield, we have Byron Buxton for now. Let's hope for another healthy season from him, because he did play well last year when he had his opportunities. Matt Wallner is another guy where, 2 seasons ago, had really high aspirations for him and still do. Last year was kind of his season to kind of work out the kinks. This year, I feel like it can really go either way for him. And then we kind of have that Trevor Larnach, Harrison Bader, Deshaun Kiersey Jr. kind of trio that are probably going to be working around the rest of the field as the season goes on. So kind of mostly familiar faces, but a couple guys that I'm excited to see Kiersey work. Or I think you mentioned him as a guy that you were kind of back and forth on whether he was going to make it as well.
Yeah, and I think the big thing about Kiersey is being the Minnesota guy where you can see St. Paul Saints baseball when the Twins are out of town or just grab a $5 ticket. I was really impressed with Kiersey, what he did last year in AAA, because he always felt like he was making an impact whenever he took the field. I kind of saw that early career Byron Buxton in him, where once he's in the lineup, he's going to make an impact, whether it's on the bases, in the field, or at the plate. And I kind of think he's going to be a little bit of a breakout guy. And I think the biggest breakout guy will go for someone you had mentioned a little bit, Matt Wallner. And this is kind of my bold take for the 2025 season. I think Matt's going to be a 30 to 35 home run guy.
Wow.
Because you saw him struggle at the beginning of April and May, where he got sent down last year, but then he came back with just this fire, this passion, and he was killing it all over the field. When he stepped up to kind of earn that opening day right fielder DH spot, you can see that kind of passion back in him and how he's working down in spring training. And I've seen a lot of other people with this take, but I think we need another hometown guy to rally around. The Forest Lake native, you have the best storyline. Like, this is his hometown team. He grew up in Minnesota, and I think we're looking for a poised breakout year with him. A lot of people are saying Larnach's going to be our guy, and he's going to be the all-star representative for us. I'd love to see it, but I kind of think Wallner is due for something big this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that outfield has a lot of potential, both with guys that can hopefully finally stay healthy and guys that I think are going to have their breakout year, as well as, a guy like Trevor Larnach. He hasn't quite gotten to that point. But I think that he's been a consistent guy that can always come in when the situation calls for it, which in this outfield with all the injuries that happen with it is a really good factor to have.
Exactly.
I'll take a quick little break here to give a quick plug. The last 2 years in a row, I've done a live stream during the NFL draft. I'll be doing that again this year. So it's going to be the 24th of April. It starts at 7 o'clock. I'll be live at around, I'm guessing, 6:30. Hopefully the Vikings have a pick to select this year. We'll see what they do. But there's going to be some really interesting stuff this year, so make sure you tune in to the NFL draft party. I'll be posting about that in just a few days, so make sure you tune in for that as well. All right, so now moving on to the defensive side of things. So first of all, the starting pitching rotation. First of all, I want to say I've seen a lot of things on Instagram. You cannot be using ERA as an argument in 2025.
No,
I've seen so many people, people talking about, hey, this rotation for the Twins is still really good. It's got some solid pieces. And then it's just someone commenting, listing all of the ERAs, listing ERAs for guys that got hurt and didn't have all their opportunities last year. ERAs from guys like Pablo Lopez, who it just kind of felt like he last year was pitching really well, but it's just kind of that baseball thing where he was not getting his breaks. He was just kind of having a down year in general. But I feel like the stats you saw last year didn't really reflect the fact that these guys are kind of on the upswing again for 2025. Joe Ryan was amazing last year before he got hurt, and Bailey Ober had a huge breakout season, and it just didn't feel like one-offs. Simeon Woods Richardson I feel really good about, because I feel like all the things we saw him struggle with at the end of last year were all due to the fact that he was not a starter in 2023. He was put into that position, into that role with the exit of Sonny Gray, and he pitched really well the first half, and we've seen it, we saw it with Royce Lewis, we saw it with multiple guys their first year. I mean, you're just not used to that kind of schedule in that high level, and a lot of guys just kind of lose steam. So you got Simeon Woods Richardson playing really well, I expect, this year as well. And you can talk about all of these guys as well, but I also want to get your opinion. I personally think that it would be a really good idea to have kind of a somewhat bullpen day every time Chris Paddack pitches, where you got 2-3 innings from Paddack, 2-3, maybe 4 innings from Varland. You can kind of see how both of those two play and kind of have them as a two-headed monster. Because really, I think if we had another guy we were solid about, I think Chris Paddack would be a bullpen guy. I think he has shown that he would be much better in the bullpen throughout the last couple years of his career, especially, he got hurt a couple years ago and we had to be put in that position, played really well. So what are your thoughts about this, starting pitching core as well as that last idea?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. When I look at this rotation in general, top to bottom, I'm very confident about this rotation. Like you said last year, where people like to throw ERA out there, it's like throwing wins out there. Like, remember the DeGrom Cy Young year where he had like 4 or 5 wins, but he was just unstoppable? ERA is not a stat that we can look at and say this is the value of a starting pitcher anymore, because there are those unlucky little runs and stretches. Like Pablo, to start the season, he couldn't find his groove. He had a couple of good games to start, but then he was pitching in cold weather. You saw the drop on the curveball wasn't happening as much. He was letting up a lot of walks, but then he kind of found his groove again and kind of slipped back into it, where I think if we can fire on all cylinders, it's a solid rotation where from top to bottom, Lopez, Ryan, Ober, those 3, people are talking about them as Cy Young dark horses and contenders. I don't see why not. If
Absolutely.
Tarek Skubal can come out of nowhere and kind of light up the world, if Ryan has a hell of a run, why isn't he in the talks, or Ober? Because I don't think I've seen a dominant pitcher like Ober come out of nowhere like he has, because he, college at Charleston to minor leagues, not a lot of people talked about him. I barely knew anything about him when he got up to the big leagues, but ever since it was this one pitching performance in 22, I want to believe, where he lit up the White Sox on the last or second to last day of the season. And ever since then, he's kind of lit the world on fire. And I'm excited to see a first real full season of dark horse Ober. But going back to kind of your Simeon Wood Richardson and Chris Paddack, I think Woods is going to be a solid number 4 guy where we'll get 5 or 6 good innings from him. He looked solid in spring training when he's in that starter role. He had a couple where he came in to relieve for Pablo after a couple innings just to get his work in, but I don't like to look at spring training stats as like, hey, we need to run for the hills because we need to panic right now. Paddack, I think he's an interesting case this year, because in previous years we had the injury history, we had coming off Tommy John, we had no real guarantees of what we were going to get with him. And then this year in spring, he started to sit right about 96, 97, top velo we haven't seen since his Padre days. I think if we can make a 2-headed monster with it, like I love the idea of pairing him with Louis, especially where we can fully commit Louis Varland to being a bullpen guy. Because we put him in the bullpen during spring, and he has a 0 ERA. He's topping out at 100. He's making guys look foolish on his curveball. I mean, I think if he can keep this kind of progression, that number 5 slot, making that a two-headed monster, would be a solid idea.
Absolutely. Yeah, it should be interesting to see. Hopefully, all 5 of these guys can stay healthy. Because again, having Lopez, Ryan, Ober at their top is going to be really scary those first few games of each homestand. Going into the bullpen, obviously, you've got Brock Stewart, who's sitting injured. He's kind of one of those guys where we thought he was going to be one of those top guys in the rotation going into the last couple of years. Just kept on getting hurt. Last year, started the year hurt, came back for like 2 games. We thought he was just having trouble readjusting. Turns out he was still hurt, and we just didn't get to see him last year. You got guys like, Joan Duran. I really don't think that tough season last year is going to be the norm for him. He's too good of a pitcher. He was dealing with some injuries to start the season as well, which is never easy for a guy that throws that much heat. Griffin Jax had a great season last year. He was able to break out of that reputation he had the year before of just blowing every game he was in, to the point where now he's one of the top guys in our bullpen. And Sands, Alcala are kind of in that position where I feel like they could go either way as well when they come in. But Sands at his best is awesome. Alcala has a lot of potential as well. And then you get into, Topa. I didn't even mention Varland, who I think, like we talked about, is going to be really good out of the bullpen and kind of found his place there. Obviously, the biggest excitement with the additions this year, Danny Coulombe, who I think I'm pronouncing that right finally, because I've heard 5 different ways of pronouncing that over the offseason. He's going to be good. Obviously, he was with the Twins. It's one of those nice situations where a guy comes back much better than you kind of sent him away as. So it's good to have him back. You got a guy like Justin Topa, who was injured all last year. We'll see how he does as well. But kind of a mix of guys that are going to, break out of a tough year, are going to try and continue to build their reputation, and guys that really are toss-ups as well that should make this bullpen interesting, like you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing looking at this season, where last year we went into it and it was bona fide closer, Duran, no questions asked. But now we have a couple of guys at the back end that you're like, okay, I don't know if we have a set closer now. Like, obviously, if you're a Twins fan, you go to the game, you get the light show with Duran, you think that's our closer, that's our guy. But then you saw Jax break out, you saw Sands had a really good year, you saw all these breakout things. Alcala was kind of on that precipice where he had the right things, but just never put it together, where his movements up in spring, there's a lot of different stats that people are saying he could be a nasty back end of the bullpen guy. I think going into the season, I'm intrigued by the fact that we don't have a bona fide closer. Like, obviously Duran is topping out 100, 101, 102 with an insane splinker. His cutter is insane. His curveball is insane. His changeup. But I love the idea that you don't know what you're getting out of that bullpen until it actually happens, where I'd love to see Duran come in, top out at 102 for every guy and strike them all out. But if there's days where it's like Jax is going to be our guy, Sands is going to be our guy, Varland's going to be our guy, we can see some high intensity bullpen, and we can see him put in those pressure situations where I'm intrigued by that, because I love the kind of rotating bullpen kind of thing, where we grew up where Joe Nathan was the guy, be all end all for the Twins, and we haven't really had a bona fide guy. We had Glenn Perkins, who was awesome and multi-year all-star, but we had 2 real periods where we didn't have the guy. Like, we had Matt Capps, we had a couple of guys here and there to end the 2010s into the 2020s, but I think we'll see some pretty cool stuff out of the Jax-Duran combo, and I think we'll see some surprise saves from Sands, Alcala, and Varland.
All right, so now to kind of just finish things off here, we're going to go over, just want to hear one thing from each of us that's a reason to be optimistic, a reason to be pessimistic, and then standings prediction, will we make the playoffs, just kind of all that in general. I'll start by saying I think the reason for optimism for me is the pitching staff in general can carry us if they're all firing on all cylinders, as well as the young core of guys that provide some depth for us. Obviously, there are some positions where we are concerned about depth, namely the one being starting pitching. If a couple guys get hurt, we might be in some trouble there. But for the most part, I feel like we do have a good mix of guys that are starting to establish themselves, guys that are good veteran presences like Correa and Buxton, as well as that kind of young, core we have. A lot of guys that are in the minors that, if they can stay healthy, will also be on the way up as well. For pessimism, obviously injuries is the biggest one, as well as just a general. I feel like last year you felt that cloud hanging over the team of poor management, the poll ads and everything to do with that. I was hoping that at the very least that cloud would be lifted with the selling of that team. Not to mention the fact that the third one I'm the most concerned about is just, I feel like with the rotation of these guys, the injuries mixed with how many young guys are coming up and going down, I feel like Rocco's constant, mixing of the way this team is set up was good in some ways because it gives guys those opportunities. Obviously, in some ways, he doesn't have a choice because of all the injuries. But I do feel like there's so many different lineups, and a lot of times that isn't a good combination for team camaraderie, keeping the same guys together. Those are really the main things I'm concerned about. As in terms of predictions, I feel like it's going to be one of those things where I could think either one on any given day based on the way this team has performed last year going into this year. I would not fault anyone for saying this team could win the Central, and I wouldn't fault any team for saying they could fall apart and win less than half of their games. I'm going to have to say that the Twins are going to win just around 90 games this year. We'll have to see if that's enough for the division. I doubt it'll be enough for the playoffs in general because I just feel like there's so many strong teams this year. I think, honestly, it more comes down to what we're going to get out of our division than it is us, because I do think that we will win around that many games, but Cleveland could win more or less. Detroit had a really great year last year, but it kind of felt like they were kind of mixing and matching players. The Royals had a disappointing offseason. Like, the White Sox, I'm kidding. The White Sox are going to win 40 games this year. But all those teams are kind of in a similar situation as us, just for different reasons. Like, any of these teams could sneak up and grab the Central. Any of those teams could completely fall apart, and that's why it's just so hard to predict this division.
Yeah, this division in general is just a crapshoot. And I'm going to start off with the pessimistic instead of the optimistic, because it's exactly what we're talking about right now, that cloud hanging over not just management, but the way the season ended last year, where Correa was hurt for an extended period, Buxton was hurt, we lost Joe Ryan after the All-Star break, no addition at the deadline, and it just fell apart where 3 days from the remainder of the season, we fell out of the playoffs. We were there, and then we just fell out because we couldn't get the job done to finish it. And I think that's kind of the cloud that's over everyone right now. Obviously, we talked about injuries. I hate talking about injuries because it seems like that's become the narrative of the Twins. It doesn't help that Royce is out to start the year and Brooks is out, but both of them seem to be very minor injuries, and we'll pray that they can get back pretty quickly. But I'm going to go into this optimism by saying one thing I didn't expect coming into this offseason is a healthy Byron Buxton offseason where he went in and he was healthy and he came out and we didn't see any nagging injuries during spring. We didn't see anything that really held him back. And when Buxton's on the field, we tend to win games just because he is a difference maker. You can tell he's kind of changing his style. He's not crashing into the wall anymore. He's not trying to leg out a triple when it's obviously a double. But I think if we can keep our main guys on the field, whether it's Correa, Buxton, Royce, and even the depth guys, if we can keep them on the field, there's no reason why we can't take the Central. There was a lot of everyone wants to point at the Twins and be like, this is all you did during the offseason with our additions. No one in the Central really made an insane move to grab that title. Like, there were a couple of great depth moves. There were a couple of trades that might help them out. Jonathan India to the Royals. I mean, it could be a really big crapshoot, or we could separate it in the first couple of weeks where it's obvious running away with it. But I don't know if I can give an exact record prediction because, like you said, 90 wins might not be enough for the playoffs. But I think the Twins will take the Central, or at the very least will be right on the heels at number 2. Because if we saw what we did at the beginning of last year, where we were tenacious, and whether it was the rally sausage or just the Polaroid camera, anything that was kind of rallying the team together, if we can get down and dirty with it to end the season and end on a run that's complete opposite, I could see us doing something pretty special. But obviously we've got the Twins hangover of Pohlads are still here. There's nothing going to change, but I don't know. I see kind of a light at the end of the tunnel. I think something's different about this team.
Yeah, I think that everything boils down to, I guess we'll see, for this team. Either way, you can say all you want about how, it sucks that things have happened with this team, with ownership. Baseball's back, and regardless of what happens, this should be a very fun team to watch. So I'm very excited to watch this team, and we're all hoping for another AL Central championship this year. So again, opening day, 3:15 tomorrow on Thursday if you're watching this tomorrow. And it should be interesting because we're going up against Sonny Gray, the former Twin, that, I mean, there were points where he was kind of disgruntled with the team, the way that he was put out there. So it should be an interesting game to watch in St. Louis. Thankfully not in Minnesota because I don't think they're ready for that yet over there. But thanks so much for watching this one. Thanks so much, Jake, for joining me.
Anytime.
And I'll be sure to join or have you join me for some NFL talk as well. A lot of things happened for the Vikings this year. I want to give a proper breakdown of how all that went down. So maybe in the next couple weeks, Jake will be back and talking about that as well. But for both of us, thanks so much for watching, and go Twins, and we'll see you on the flip side.